Nirvana Prakarana, the Transcendence. Chapter 1, the story of Bhushunda. Amidst the immovable infinitude called the Himalayas, a lonely cave on the shoulder of a mountain. The winds howl outside its gaping mouth. The soft drizzle makes way for the silent snow journeying slowly through the skies to settle on the ancient glaciers, adding to their thickness and strength. In welcoming this celestial guest, everything becomes silent. It may also be in an expectation that is in the air for a great cosmic event. Unmoved by the chilling cold, undaunted by the wilderness of the high snows, a man sits inside the cave. It appears as though he is disconnected with his body, for it is hardly covered by any cloth, nor is there any dhuni, the small warmth-giving fire. His eyes gaze at the flame of a small earthen lamp. Though there is a parching thirst in those eyes, they are patient, so much so they are ready to wait for all eternity if necessary. Suddenly, the icy cold wind blowing outside changes its direction. It seems as though it cannot contain its curiosity anymore to know what is happening inside the cave. Entering the cave, it blows off the flame of the lamp, and simultaneously, the long journey of the seeker in the cave comes to an end. He discovers his forgotten state. The other persons may call him the awakened one, Jnani, the Buddha, or by any other name. Whether he chooses to leave that lonely mountain cave for sharing his wisdom, or remains where he is and continues the spread of fragrance of his enlightenment so as to effect a silent influence, is entirely up to his nature. Though the merger of the seeker and the wind blowing off the flame may only be the phenomena of synchronicity as explained by Carl Jung, both the happenings are similar in nature. The light provided by the flame of the lamp illuminating the cave without, and the light of awareness illuminating all the activity within, went off simultaneously. Whether the eyes of the seeker were open and gazing at the flame of the lamp, or closed and were gazing at the light within, made no difference. The blowing off, however, occurred almost together. The turbulent activity called mind is initially contained by eliminating the impure vasanas with the help of pure vasanas. This is achieved by leading a life congenial for seeking. Even the mellow sattvic activity like the renunciation, compassion, love, etc. is to be dropped ultimately for the quiescence, which is achieved by reducing the unconsciousness through awareness. Religion in general, directly or indirectly recommends Sakshi Bhava or the non-involved witnesshood. But it is like posting a person of authority, say a policeman, to keep the mischief of the activity away. At this stage, there is this presence of the policeman, which in the world of spirit may only be a light helping one to witness the inner activity with total awareness. This too is to be dropped. Nirvana refers to the blowing off this inner flame, which is the watcher or the witness. But yes, this stage when one is ready for the blown off state is only the consummation, the fulfillment of all practice. Consequently, one cannot do anything to reach it. One can practice yama, niyama, vichara, dhyana, etc. to develop prajna, the awareness. One can retain the continual awareness, but The entity who is aware remains during any practice. The seeker remains and continues to remain till there is a merger of the one who is aware with pure awareness, which has been called by different names, Chit, Satta Matra, etc. This Prakarana, entitled Nirvana Prakarana, tries to discuss the practices that take the seeker very near to the said stage, while giving broad hints about the state itself through suggestive language. It has in all 15 stories packed with innumerable hints, invaluable suggestions in which the characters are representative of the seeker, as it also discusses the problems on way. One of the greatest theories put forward by science is the relativity of time and space. Though the theory expounded by Albert Einstein is beyond the scope of understanding of laymen, this much is understood by everyone, that both time and space are eternally changing and are always relative to some hypothetical unchanging principle. While the fact is, everything changes, as the cosmos is in the state of dynamic balance. This sarga begins with the statement from sage Vasishta that there is nothing like the quarters and time, and that the immutable and non-dual Brahman alone exists because it transcends all change, beginning and end or destruction. Vasishta said that one should constantly remember this fact to refrain from any identification with the changing phenomena. So long as there is even a trace of ajnana, the ultimate state cannot be reached. So long as there is the desire to enjoy the world, the wrong notions will never wear off. All the changing phenomena are only an appearance, like the vast ocean, ebbing and falling. As long as the I identifying with the manifestations exist, so long do the illusions of chitta exist. As long as there is desire for the objects with the idea of I and mine, so long will the illusion exist. The reality envelops those who contemplate without any sankalpa on all-pervading self, the limitless jnana. They regard friends, even assassins hired to kill them without any duplicity of mind, can be said to have truly worshipped the Brahman, like a waterfall or the rapids along the river washing the trees on the bank. Those who have purged themselves of all impurities, who have not only understood but lived the truth enshrined in the Shastras, are like sun dispelling darkness. But those who, in spite of the understanding of the Shastras, and even have practiced incessantly, but have not cognized the principle, will be tossed about by the vrittis. This is due to the fact that for such people it has only become intellectual knowledge. Opening verses of the Sarga try to give a synopsis of the earlier Prakarana in very bold strokes. The basic attitude of a jnana seeker has been given so that the course of his voyage is set. The deepest hint is that even when one succeeds in curtailing the gross mental activity to a great extent through incessant practice, one can still wander aimlessly. This is mostly because the practice has just become a ritual or an empty gesture without any awareness. The author suggests keeping constant awareness as the beacon light so that the aim of the practice is achieved. Muni Vasishta went on to describe the mechanism of avidya or wrong notion. Out of Satchitananda, the existence, wisdom, bliss absolute, the witness of all, intelligence arose. The intelligence which is subject to change created the three states, subtle, middle and gross. through the three gunas, sattva, rajas and tamas. These three kinds of avidya generate rebirth for all beings. The destruction of avidya constitutes the ultimate state, and the involvement in avidya, samsara. The gunas are known as the Prakriti, which has the hierarchy of beings from sattva through tamas, from rishis who are totally conscious to inert trees. On being questioned by Rama as to how intelligence came to be embodied in trees and plants and trammels of excessive ajnana, Vasishtha replied that the intelligence in plant is that state when it is not without manas as in rocks, nor with manas as an intermediate state between sat and asat. If they are without the duality inducing manas, Rama reasoned, why not consider the state of trees as moksha? Vasishtha replied lovingly that the state of satta common to all can be achieved only after vichara. Only on complete experience and renunciation of all vasanas can one reach the state of satta samanya. The state of the trees is like that of seed or a sprout which has the latent tree in it, having vasanas in a dormant form. Both tree and an enlightened man have apparently the same unity. But the unity is qualitatively different in both. Sage Vasishtha said that one can achieve the moksha only on completely experiencing and eliminating all vasanas. The experience helps one to understand the futility of vasanas. At the same time, one has to increase the consciousness while making efforts towards their elimination. The story of expulsion of Adam and Eve in the Genesis of the Bible can throw more light on this. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat out of it. For the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die. And out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field, and brought them into Adam to see what he could call them. And whatsoever Adam called every living creature that has the name thereof. It is deeply symbolic story, and what happens to all human beings. The instructions of Lord God not to eat the tree of knowledge itself is an indirect invitation from God to do so. It is of everybody's everyday experience that if we want to ensure that the children do something, all we have to do is tell them not to. The second aspect is that knowledge offered by the tree is that of good and evil, or faulty judgment and reason. Further, even before allowing them to venture into eating, the God has taught them how to differentiate by asking him to name the different creatures. This is evidently a pointer that while all the creature forms the part of Eden, man alone has come out of it by becoming partially aware through the differentiation and judgment. Out of all creatures, man alone experiences a sense of shame. It is not that God expelled Adam, but he expelled himself through judgment and differentiation. In the vegetable and animal kingdom, there is unity in unconsciousness. For example, they feel the hunger and appease it. They may either search or hunt for food. The predators kill their prey, but actually it is only the force of hunger that is acting. There is no killer or eater. While in man it is totally different. There is the ego which differentiates others from itself. The ego is responsible for shame, hatred and other feelings. That is why we see that children, before learning to differentiate the I from the other, are as innocent as the animals. This I is a distant echo of the stirrings of consciousness in the unconsciousness. The unity of unconsciousness has been divided, broken into two: 90% unconsciousness and 10% awareness. The ego has started thinking of the right and the wrong, good and evil. It has also started looking down at anything animalistic. Friedrich Nietzsche has said that man is only a becoming. He is in a state between the states of wholly unconscious and wholly conscious. So there is no peace for him till he re-enters the Eden of unity. But the gate through which he comes out of it, namely ego, is totally closed for him. He has to enter it through another gate by increasing the consciousness to 100%, and he tries to go back by resorting to unconsciousness through alcohol or drugs. But it can only be a temporary measure, for it does jump back to partial consciousness. It is like the fantasy of a sapling trying to go back to its seedhood, or a chick trying to re-enter the egg. The sage continued by saying that the persons who have burnt ajnana, the seed of impure vasanas, and have achieved the state of satta samanya, never suffer from pain, whether they are embodied or disembodied. However, even a trace of impure vasanas, like debts, disease, poison, anger, and attachment, is sufficient to afflict us all our life and to cause rebirth. For these vasanas are responsible for the conviction that the universe and the Supreme Brahman are separate, and this is the avidya. When requested by Rama to throw more light on the state of enlightened ones like Shankara and Shiva and others, the Muni replied, "For such persons, all manifested beings of cosmos, whether great or small, are the stainless Brahman. Jnana is Brahman, world is Brahman, the 5 elements are Brahman, friends, kinsmen, even enemies are Brahman. Just as this universe appears dark to the blind and bright to those who have eyes, it appears blissful to jnanins and painful to ajnanis." The sage added that whosoever perceives all as the partless Brahman, such a person alone is Brahman. He alone achieves immortality. Though intellectually one is able to get an idea of what the sage is narrating, how can one achieve this state? Rama voiced this doubt by appealing to the sage Vasishta to explain fully the 2 paths of true jnana and control of prana for eliminating all vasanas. To this query, the sage responded with affection by saying that the technique of crossing the ocean of samsara is called as yoga. There are 2 means of yoga to avert the pain of existence. The 2 means of jnana and control of prana are to be classed under yoga, yet ordinarily the control of prana in particular and elimination of fluctuations of the mind in general alone is called yoga. To the temperament of some, yoga is most desirable. To the temperament of others, jnana is most desirable. Vasishta observed that he had already explained jnana and he presently would deal with the yoga. And as an illustration, he would narrate a wonderful story. Once upon a time, Vasishta was amidst an august assembly of Devendra along with other enlightened sages. The stories of Chiranjeevins or the long-lived came up, and a Muni named Satapata told about such Chiranjeevin living on the branch of a kalpa tree on the northern side of mountain Mahameru. His name was Bhushunda, who was the longest living yogin capable of sitting in yoga for any length of time, and was totally desireless. He had the wealth of moksha, great intelligence, and extreme quiescence, with a capacity to clearly see the three periods of time of past, the present, and the future. Listening to this, Vasishtha was filled with an intense aspiration of meeting this great person. Accordingly, when Vasishtha reached the Kalpa tree on top of Mount Meru, filled with fragrant flowers, young swans which were chanting the Sama, cuckoos, parrots, peacocks, and other birds which were developing Shivajnana through Skanda. Bhushunda, with an Atlantean form, full mind, observing inner silence, seeing the sage, welcomed him with affection and necessary respect. He expressed his genuine joy in receiving the enlightened sage Vasishtha. Bhushunda knew the purpose of his visit and yet wanted to hear it from the sage himself. Thereupon, Vasishtha requested the great yogin to trace his lineage, the way in which he had attained Tattvajnana, the duration of his present life, and how and from whom had the wisdom dawned on Bhushunda. The virtuous Bhushunda said that in the divine presence of Supreme Shiva, myriads of gunas or hosts in peculiar faces and shapes live who are called as the Bhutaganas or the elementals around the Kailasa mountain, the abode of Shiva. The Shaktis or potencies having their abodes on top of the mountains, earth, forests, cremation grounds and bodies dance before him. These Shaktis are named Jaya, Vijaya, Jayanti, Aparajita, Siddha, Rakta, Alambusha and Utpala according to their degrees. Alambusha has a Vahana or a vehicle by name Chanda, a crow. Once there was a festival where all the Shaktis had gathered in front of Shiva when they danced and laughed under excessive intoxication. Meanwhile, in another part of Akasha, their vehicles too were in a similar state. Chanda sportingly united with the female swans which became pregnant. After the celebration, the Shaktis retired to their respective places along with their vehicles. The swans narrated what had happened along with their present condition. The Shaktis accepted it as the divine mandate and gave the swans their freedom till delivering the offspring. The eggs were laid by the side of Manasa lake. In due course, the eggs hatched, issuing 21 young ones, the progeny of Chanda, and Bhushunda was among one of them. Young crows prayed to Alambusha, the Brahma Shakti, who, arising from her samadhi, graced them all with moksha. In deep gratitude, they prayed the Shakti to guide them to choose a place for enjoying the bliss of Nirvana. Shakti guided them to the Kalpa tree. Vasishtha, unable to restrict his thirst to know, inquired as to how the great crow Bhushunda had attained such a long life, to which the great yogin said that he and his 20 brothers had spent many kalpas on that very tree, when at last his brothers discarded their bodies for moksha. Sage Vasishtha asked further as to how Bhushunda could survive the terrible pralayas or deluges. Yogi Bhushunda replied that he left the nest and remaining in the Akasha, he performed the dharana on the element contrary to the element of deluge, so as to remain unaffected in the state of Nirmikalpa Samadhi. Explaining it further, he continued that during the pralaya or dissolution brought about by the 12 Adityas or suns, he performed apadharana, the dharana on water, for earth on Agni, the fire, for water on Vayu, air, etc. At the end of Creator's night, he once again came back to the Kalpa tree. Drinking from these nectar-like words, Vasishtha was interested in knowing why the other yogis do not continue to live in spite of their knowing the technique of dharana. Bhushunda of infinite patience replied that none can possibly overstep the mandate of Parameshwara. It was his will that Bhushunda should act in such a manner and the yogis in the manner which they do, as everything is preordained, following the universal law of nature. Then he went on to describe the multiple creations and deluges of repeated incarnations of Vishnu, Rishis Agastya, Narada, Bharadwaja, Marichi, Pulastya, Ganesha, Kartikeya and others. Samudramanthana, or churning of ocean to get ambrosia, that is Amrita, the Vedas being saved by Vishnu, etc. He said that it is impossible to tell of every creation, as even for Vasishtha to whom he was talking, this was the 8th time. Bhushunda said, all these are temporal things which are latent in one reality, like foam in the ocean, and will revive and perish again and again. And that one can transcend death by eliminating wrong action, desires, greed, anger, lust and infatuation. One who establishes himself in the non-dual reality is never afflicted by change and illusion. Bhushunda said that such a state was attained by him by engaging himself in meditation on prana and its control, due to which he ceased cognizing the external things and arrested the death. Death and impermanence have been the starting points of many an inquiry into spirituality, and India in particular has contributed positively in this direction. Observing impermanence and deaths all around, a seeker starts thinking of the possibility of transcending death. So the discussion on those persons who are Chiranjeevs can be taken literally, or those persons who have known the deathless principle, and the latter position appears more practical from a seeker's point of view. Deathless crow Bhushunda symbolizes Bhuvaneshu Sarveshwapi Sukham Dayate Viharati iti Bhushunda iti prasiddha. One who covers the whole universe in one blissful flight. He has been described by the author as one who has transcended attraction and aversion, silently quiescent and full of poise. Regarding the psychic powers, the great sage Patanjali in his Yoga Darshanam devotes a whole chapter giving all the techniques of achieving them. So it is not strange that Bhushunda had them. However, for an earnest seeker, they can only be a source of great distraction, but we have to be open-minded so as to accept that such things exist. Another thing we will do well to keep in mind is that pralaya and the creation are everyday happenings when we enter deep sleep and return to wakeful state. Bhushunda, the great yogi, then continued when Vasishtha requested him to describe the control of prana. First, he described the difference between prana and apana as the vital forces having upward and downward movements respectively, and went on giving the 8 courses of achieving control over prana and in turn moksha. But he also added that one should take up any one of these 8 courses without any break in practice for achieving the end. When the practice becomes a part of one's nature, then the course of life is set. Another important thing was told, that Bhushunda had transcended time and so lived only in the present without keeping any goal or aim, because the goal projects the mind into future. Having learnt about the mystic secrets, Vasishtha returned to his abode reluctantly, for parting from jnanis can be very painful. The mystic secrets have been intentionally avoided in this discussion, as they can be learnt only under an experienced guide. One should never venture into the practice through the theoretical knowledge on the length of Puraka, inhalation, Rechaka, exhalation, or Kumbhaka, holding of breath, either inside or outside, obtained from the books. This can cause a lot of complications. An experienced guide, however, especially an enlightened master, can bring about a speedy transformation, because an enlightened person guides the seeker according to his aptitude, level, and capacity. The purpose of pranayama is mainly to increase the awareness and to reduce the ultimately eliminate unconsciousness. Here, the breath is made use of for achieving the end. Breathing is such an act which is usually unconscious. However, it can also become a conscious action. By achieving control over breathing, one can slowly and steadily gain control over the unconscious. The method taught by the Buddha happens to be the safest. He called it as Anapanasati, the awareness of incoming and outgoing breath. One is asked to do passive observation without any change in the speed or depth of breathing. At the same time, the seeker is suggested to increase the time period of this awareness without any violent force. When one tries to become attentive to breath, one cannot help but notice the stubbornness of the mind, which strays again and again from the object of attention. It is to be brought back to breath repeatedly without any annoyance or impatience. The shloka from the Bhagavad Gita puts it beautifully. Yato yato nischalati manaschancharamasstiram tatastato niyamyetat atmanyeva vasham nayet. As and when the vagrant and unstable mind gets distracted, there and then one should fix it on self by taking it away from distraction. Ananda, the disciple and constant companion of Buddha, said one day to the master that in more than 30 years of his company with the Buddha, he had never seen him make any movement in his sleep, nor had he seen him any unnecessary movement while awake. The Buddha is reputed to have said that Ananda had not practiced the Anapanasati properly. The practice of Anapanasati eliminates unconsciousness. Even if the body is asleep, the mind is awake all the time. Breath is usually never taken seriously, for it is taken for granted. But if it is done consciously and with full awareness, it can become a door to Nirvana. For that matter, any act can become a door if it is lit by the light of awareness.